Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today I'm very honored to speak with none other than the CEO and founder of PikcioChain. It's a very exciting and up-and-coming blockchain design and architecture, and to explain this better, we have Didier Collin de Casaubon. Didier, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So if you're not familiar with Didier, you're going to be very soon. Very exciting prospects coming out of France, doing amazing things. Didier himself has a postgrad in philosophy, which may surprise many, but unsurprisingly, coupled with that is a master in mathematics, which is equally impressive in that they are quite different faculties. He also has a master of business as well, and he has worked in the business and banking sector for many, many years, for well over 15 years, in fact. He's also had a string of involvement in entrepreneurial activities and would arguably be an entrepreneur himself, and has a strong position in software industries in the workplace as well. So Didier, you're well experienced in many different areas. Would you like to just slightly add to, your breadth of experience?
Well, thank you for the introduction. That's way too much for my modesty. But I have a large experience as entrepreneur, either for myself or for entrepreneur in residence for large groups. As you said, mainly in software, and more precisely, how do software or digitization change an existing trade or industry? That's what I did in many sectors, including publishing, video games, and now banking.
I see. And obviously you have knowledge of blockchain, and that's why you've decided to make the transition. Let's find out why, in terms of exactly what the company is that you represent. It's called PikcioChain, and many people don't know. It stands for the personal data chain, and we'll explore that. But perhaps the best thing to do is talk about the problem that sort of precipitated and motivated the PikcioChain to evolve and become what it is.
Right. So we do specialize indeed in personal data, which is translated in customer data when you talk to business. And these data are a very peculiar type of asset, because they're most of the time under strong regulation and growing regulation. And doesn't really matter countries. It might be horizontal regulation, or it might be vertical, like in the US for banking, health, etc. So heavy regulation, hard to comply with. Secondly, of course, a lot of security issues. As you know, there is hacking almost every day, and not almost there is hacking every day.
Every day.
And last but not least, and that's probably fundamental also for the design of our chain, is that personal data, in order to become customer data and have some value in an exchange, have to be certified in a way that if I declare on internet something about myself, I can almost say, or I do say, almost anything.
Right.
Long as it's not verified or certified, it doesn't carry any kind of weight. And that generates for companies in a lot of issues and costs to start to now go through these data and figure out which one are good, which one are not good, or which one are useful. At the same time, as a user, because you have that sort of tracking feeling, which is unpleasant to have Big Brother always tracking you without always seeing the real servers behind it, then you adopt some strategy to kind of camouflage yourself, calling yourself many names, etc., etc. So the result is kind of not very efficient. So you have high regulation, high security issues, and also a big distrust in terms of the quality of the data. So that system that's in place since a few decades now, and still the companies who can make a lot of money out of it, like Google, etc., it's still not very efficient as a balanced, trustable, reliable system. At the same time, we see that personal data is growing in terms of amount, of quantity, and it's also becoming more and more the currency on internet. So if you have a currency that you cannot trust, you don't really have a currency. And that's what we're trying to solve. How can we treat that as a real asset?
Okay, so let's talk about what it states that you are essentially, given that you have explained all of the motivations in terms of problems in the marketplace. It says that you are trying to enable the collection, the certification, and the exchange of personal data. So it's not just a case of addressing personal data, but you're breaking it down into clear areas. So could we talk about that in those key areas, of collection, certification, and exchange?
Right. So, by example, if we take the banking industry as an example, which is our main customer base for the moment, with large banks and insurance arm of these banks, they have in the digital world, and they're going more and more into digital, they have that collection issue for, by example, when you want to open an account. Mm-hmm. It's called KYC, so know your customer. It's a process that's highly regulated that require banks to identify you, but more than identify you, authenticate the documents, etc., etc. So it's a process that's costly, and so far is made most of the time face-to-face.
Right.
In most of the countries we operate. But if you want to go mobile, that's a little bit of a bummer, because that means you can open an account online, but you still have to go to the branch. That doesn't quite make sense. And one of the reasons is because the process itself is not really in place for banks for the collection of these data and the authentication of these data. So now we provide to banks a way to do it very smoothly in their application. We do both the collection of the data and the authentication and in the same flow of not just your face, the ID, your proof of residence, if it needs to be proof of revenues, etc., etc. So that's the collection part. Now it goes into since it's a distributed system, mm-hmm. It's or network, it goes into your device, because that's your device, and it's encrypted, of course, and with keys, etc. So it's highly secure on your device, mm-hmm. And then it's shared with the other node on the network, which is the bank. So it goes straight to one point to another one. It doesn't come to a server at Pikcio or any other server or Amazon or God knows. Mm-hmm. It's really point to point. Now, after that, since it's a distributed network that will allow now the sharing of the data, the same way it is between you and the bank. Now the bank and you, because you're always involved in the process, can start to share internally what has been done with you initially to collect the data. And so far it's not done because systems are not talking to each other into banks. So the bank is allowed internally to share the same set of data and certificate about that data. So that saves them a lot of time and money. It saves you a lot of time whenever you go from one department to another one. And then it allows the bank to also generate a sort of ecosystem of service for you. Mm-hmm. And whenever you, because you have been identified and certified by the bank, and if you want to, the bank said, okay, I have partnership with XYZ, and if you knock at the door of XYZ and say, hey, I'm a customer of this bank, and I'd like to be a customer of you, you don't have to re-go through the process of authentication, etc.
Right.
So it's a better customer experience for you, and that's you triggering the event. I mean, it's you saying, okay, I agree to share the certificate, and for the retailer, by example, it's a big reduction in risk of fraud, of time, but that processing time. So everybody is a winner here.
I see. So obviously you also argue that the world's first, so it's a lot of information you provided for there, and we'll unpack that. So obviously for the viewers as well, Didier did explain quite a lot then, and we need to really unpack that to understand it better. But they are also, the PikcioChain is the world's first means of monetizing personal data in the marketplace, which is quite a feat in itself, arguably quite revolutionary. Let's talk about aspects such as your past in terms of what you've been doing up until now, because clearly you're emerging now as a project. You're about to do a very hopefully successful ICO process, but you've been working for many years in the space.
Right. It's a project that has been on the way since almost a decade now, because the the issues that arise around personal data is not brand new. It just grew and became more painful. But it's at that time there was absolutely no interest in what we were trying to do. So I put that a little bit on the back burner until blockchain came, or at least Bitcoin came, and I looked at that as a potential architecture for solving one of the 3 or 4 challenges that we're facing.
Right.
I frankly at that time didn't think that blockchain would be the solution. So we developed a pure peer-to-peer network, and we add several protocols of protection, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why I didn't think it would work is that it's open by definition. And so an open blockchain and privacy, that seems kind of contradictory in the terms and in the architecture. So I gave that up until one of my co-founders, Jory, came with the idea of a permission-based blockchain, where basically it's a blockchain, but inside a sort of a defined perimeter with partners. So it might not be the pure blockchain spirit, but it definitely solves our problem in terms of one of the layers, which is a transactional layers.
Right, and we're going to talk about that more specifically in terms of the permissioned aspect. And certainly there's no loss of hope in the public domain, and we'll talk about that in the context of NEO also. But let's talk about your awards as well, Didier. You have a string of awards that you've achieved. Without talking about them specifically, let's talk about some key ones, I suppose, and really position yourself with regard to recognition.
I think the best one is always the last one, or should be the last one. The most recent one is the one we got in Paris as the innovation award for the banking industry. So we had the first prize for that, and that was very interesting because that's probably in one trade industry, which is a complex one. The banking is kind of conservative, as you know. It was the recognition of the whole process we were proposing, which is the collection, as you mentioned initially, the collection, the protection, and then the trading of the data in with our solution. So it was a big award for a use case that we were starting to implement in one major bank in Europe, and so that's recognition is the one we're very proud of.
And I like the fact that you've already had some initiatives at the grassroots trying to implement this with real use cases in banking. That's quite promising. Right. Let's talk about now your design. So important. Essentially, you're building a proprietary blockchain technology or a product. You mentioned before that it's on a permissioned basis. So let's explore that. Let's really unpack, the benefits of this, why you've chosen a permission design, again, in the context of personal data.
Yeah, I think that was frankly, a gutsy choice at that time because everybody was going for open chain existing, especially Ethereum or in the bank industry with R3 or even Hyperledger, etc. And we had a completely different approach saying, at the end of the day, regulators, if they really do their job, will not allow to have an open blockchain dealing with personal data because there you cannot you cannot control the location of the data, which is very important in any kind of regulation regarding data, especially banking or health. You're going to have very poor performance in terms of the consensus because it's going to take, like it does for any kind of crypto, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you're going to have a lot of issues that will not fly with any kind of even minimal regulation about personal data. Second, also you will have most likely the data on the chain, and again, that means you cannot control the privacy of these data because if you start to say, okay, I did agree to share these data once, but I don't anymore, then what do you do?
Right, exactly.
It's
too late.
Somewhere, and then you're screwed.
Exactly.
So we said no, that's not going to work, and that's how we kind of twisted a little bit the concept itself and say, yes, it's open, but among partners. It looks like nowadays some chain are understanding the issue and are coming to trying to fork their existing open chain into private chain. So
right.
It might work or not. I'm not going to judge what others do, but I know that we did build our own chain exactly for that and in that spirit. So the architecture is completely done for that. So we have our own proof of work. I mean, it's not proof of work. We have our own proof. We have a very constraining regulation rules about where the consensus are based, etc. So.
Right, and we're going to delve into more specifically the algorithm itself that sets you apart from all others. Let's talk about now, though, your gateways with regard to PikcioChain and essentially what you've done to build those two.
So there is two ways to use many ways to use the PikcioChain, but two main ones. Mm-hmm. One is what we call the infrastructure itself. So that we do as kind of as a white label for mainly banks for the moment and the healthcare industry where we start to grow as well through the entrance, where it's literally a company using that internally to solve their, I would call that supply chain issue. That means they want to be able, as you said, to collect data, certify them, etc. And when that's done, to capitalize on that investment and being able to share that internally among departments or among division or subsidiaries.
Right.
That's what we see the most. So we operate completely in the background. They access it very easily to APIs, etc. So that's pretty easy. And we have several application. I wouldn't call that smart contracts right there, but application that can help to keep these data update, to control the access, etc., etc. That's one thing. Now we have after that more vertical products. So it's not just B2B, it's B2B2C.
Right.
And the same corporation that use us as a B2B infrastructure can use us more as a also vertical. That means more B2B2C or directly B2C. And that's where we have we're building that into wallets, specific wallets. We have an e-banking wallet that includes the eKYC. We have one around the patient. That means your patient identity and then everything that can build up around your medical records, etc., etc.
Right.
We're building one around the token sales. So that's as a token purchaser, you will be able to qualify once as a KYC and then use that KYC to several ITOs. Since we have to call them like that now. And vice versa for ITO issuers, you will access immediately to a qualified pool of purchaser, etc. So we build verticals there, and that's these two gateways. Now, if you want to add as an individual several verticals, several wallets, you can, of course, because it's the same ID that will allow you to basically activate a few other functionalities and access another wallet. So, and that's what we call globally Pikcio B, as opposed to Pikcio Pro, which is the infrastructure.
Right, and we're going to discuss that in more detail. So, unpacking that as well, you've mentioned three key areas. You're building out the industry-specific nature, really addressing, for example, the medical industry as one. But overarching that, you have the enterprise sector that you're addressing with products like, let's talk about Pikcio Pro. So you've designed certain products with enterprise in mind. And firstly, what is Pikcio Pro and how long has that been operational?
We test, so we developed Pikcio Pro, when was that? The beginning of last year, 2017. That's what I was trying to remember, 2017. And we start to pilot it by end of the spring and the summer, and then all the way to end of the fall with banks. And now it's in deployment at a country level with a major European banks. I don't know if I can name it.
That's pretty impressive. Oh, okay. So let's reiterate that. What was the name of the bank?
BNP Paribas.
Okay, and that's also on the white paper as well, everyone. If you want to go and check, you can see strong connections there with the partners. So that's quite impressive that you've already rolled out that enterprise-focused product or technology.
Yeah, and it's very rewarding for us because we start again with a rather simple, almost frustrating problem to solve, which is the infrastructure one. You know, it's fine, but it's one side of the Pikcio chain, and then they start to say, okay, can we do the onboarding? Yes, we can. Now the credit department say, can we add the proof of residence so we can have a smooth process of credit application because we have so much churn, etc. Can we solve that? And we did add that, and now we reduce the churn dramatically. Then the insurance arm, which is extremely large division. Again, we're talking about, you know, companies in 40, 45 countries. It's not a local bank saying, oh, we insure these credit. Can we have, you know, also the claim process embed into the, in this case, we can call that smart contracts, although it's not purely a smart contract. Can we embed that? And the pilot, we reduced the 40 days of before even underwriting the case they were spending to collect the documents, etc. Here it's done it automatically. Again, in a highly compliant environment where you need to track, you need to collect and track the agreement on. You need to collect the agreement from each customer saying, yes, I agree that you collect my data for da.
I see.
And you also have to be able to track that consent and show it to any kind of auditor. So it's extremely constraining, and we do it very, very easily because that's in the design of our application.
Well, let's talk about that in terms of revenue as well, Didier. No doubt, given that you've rolled this out, there's been revenue involved in this project already.
Yes. So we start to have revenue last year, which was good.
That's great.
It was about time after 3 years of R&D, and this year looks very promising, both in terms of the of course the infrastructure sales and also now the deployment of these wallets.
Yes.
And we will come with several more wallets now. The way we charge is probably also pretty different from some blockchain companies that are coming on the market.
Right.
We're not selling time. We're not selling the time of our developers there. We're not a sort of computer company. We really want to provide platforms and have these platforms see a lot of back and forth, basically transactions happening. And so we base our revenue model on the transaction, and before that on the creation of the Pikcio identity. So that's a sort of one-time fee and then transaction. And so we have that approach. It's not a license. It's not we charge you X amount of millions because we develop for you a special chain. No, we template everything as much as possible. So our customer can jump into that without even thinking about technology, but having, oh, I have a problem to solve. Can it solve?
And it's also a fantastic way for the consumer, for the lay consumer, to offset those costs. In the enterprise sector, it's actually free in many respects for the lay consumer, as we talk about with PikcioMe, because the consumer, no doubt, is paying for, as you said, the ID and the fee for transactions to again leverage against what we're going to be talking about now. So you have the PikcioMe aspect as well that caters for just the lay public, anyone who wants to interact in your blockchain design and architecture. Let's talk about that. How could someone like me, just anybody in the public domain, use your facility?
So you can already, but it's a real prototype. I wouldn't call it a product yet.
It's in the beta version, isn't it? Beta stage.
It's beta version, and there's so many more things that we have in plan. So the new PikcioMe will start with the token sale wallet. That's probably going to be the most accomplished one, where you will be able to a little bit more like some projects that are based on sovereign identity. You will be able to build up your KYC, but you will be also able to get things certified immediately and authenticate. And then you will, based on that, be able to share your data, and share your data first with ICO publishers or ICO issuers, which are looking for your purchase. So that's one of the things. Then we will add more of the feature. Of course, it includes any kind of communication platform of sharing and chatting, etc.
Right. And your colleague, Jurek, he has done some amazing work. He's published a demo. He's shown how it operates. It's quite an amazing user interface. It's very user-friendly. Looks quite fun, in fact. So you must be excited about that. Yes, we are.
It's coming in a few months now, and yes, so far, you know, we spend a lot of time talking to business, which is great. But it's also great to talk to users or end users, and that's one of the fantastic excitement from an ICO is that you start to have a community and to talk with that community and see the back and forth what they like, don't like, etc. So specifically for the token sale, we'll actually, for people who adopt the wallet and use it, we will distribute some of the revenues from the PKCs that have been issues from during the ICO. We will distribute that to folks so they can start to bootstrap their own wallet.
Exciting. And for those who don't know, the PKC is actually the token that Didier is referring to for the ecosystem. And now let's talk about general centralization. Obviously, you know, there's going to be questions in the space of if you're permissioned, why not just be a centralized entity like everything else, like Ethereum's nature and like Hyperledger? What would you say to those people?
I think it's, I mean, there are many technical points to that, and I'm going to leave Jurek to argue about them because he's much more expert on much better and technical on that. But I think for us, it's really wouldn't call that an activist act because that wouldn't be true. But I think we can, and if there is any reason for Pikcio to really keep moving and sweating every day, is to really try to push that envelope as far as possible to really provide something fully distributed, although there is some constraints in given or clients, etc. So that's for us. It's a you know, we're working on a fully distributed exchange. We're working on many things that are complex.
And I think also, just to help you out there, Didier, I think the key word you just said is distributed. And that's the distinction between Hyperledger essentially and you, and even Ethereum, in that they, underpinning their own core designs, there's a degree of centralization even now. So that's the fundamental distinction, I think, is that you're really working hard to distribute the data out and even for applications and for consumers to control and use their data. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's fundamentally what I dreamt about 10 years ago or 9 years ago, and I still think we can do it.
Right. So let's move across now to the use case, or rather the usability, the application itself. What can users actually do if we go back again to the Pikcio Me thing, design essentially for consumers? What can that do in terms of if we could itemize some key points? For example, I'll start you off. It can certainly manage your personal data. We know that. But it can also do some pretty amazing things like exchange and manage files.
Right. So there's across all the different wallets, you will be able to do the same thing that corporation do. That means you'll be able to collect your data from different source of data, and we provide many what we call connectors. So you'll be able to grab them, not just banking, but it could be IoTs, could be many other things. And then from them, you'll be they're all secure in your own device, where you create your kind of private little server, and from there you can start to share. You can share among C2C, so among your peers, among whoever you want, any kind of data. We're completely data agnostic, but you'll also start to share with business and trying to get benefit out of it. And one of the application here is the ICO token, which is where you're sharing your identification data, or more the certificate that you get from the bank, so you don't have to repeat. Let's say, normally an ICO purchaser or somebody that is very much into crypto try to purchase something maybe one a day or a few a week. It's not a big investment, but some so you can kind of enjoy the hype of it.
Right.
And you have to re-qualify it every single time. It's pretty burdensome.
It is.
And if you're like me, you're not that patient. So you will here you will be able to reuse that anywhere, so without having to re-go through the process. So that's one way to share your data. In general, the way we do it, because we process the sort of mining of these transaction, we redistribute no fee. We redistribute to each individual a portion of the fees. So that's a way to monetize. You don't just have a benefit in terms of service or onboarding or customer experience. You also have real PKCs coming into your wallet.
Right. So obviously you're doing two things. You're streamlining the process so we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel with subscriptions and trying to essentially sign up to different KYC services. But you're also going to make it so that it's a one-stop shop essentially, and you're making sure that the fee structure is built in.
Right,
to the design.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about now, if we go across to two areas that are fascinating, and that is your Pikcio Labs, work that you've done, and also the matchup box. What are these?
So matchup box is the original name of the company. So that's what we came up with a few years ago, and it's as bad as Pikcio, I think.
Okay.
Pikcio is a little bit less bad, but it's very hard to find a good name nowadays, and we're definitely not the champion there. Right. So Matchup Box is the initial name, and we transition now all the units that are existing in the sort of group into Pikcio. Okay. So the original company that was in Montpellier, that is in Montpellier actually, where the R&D center is, used to be called MatchaBox, and now it's going to be called Pikcio Services.
It reminds me of AntShares as opposed to Neo.
Right. So we all go into a sort of rebranding experience, which is a little bit complicated, but I think it was time to do it. Now we have the PikcioChain and then the Pikcio Corporation running it. So the Pikcio Labs is an initiative that we're taking to help startups, because we cannot address all the different use case, and that's not the goal. So we're helping startups to use the PikcioChain to a sort of lab for 2, 3 months, 4 months, depending the use case. We're trying to put them in front of corporations that come with some use case request.
Okay.
And so they have access to, of course, all the PikcioChain and the PikcioChain team. And for some of them, we'll also, after that, support them with injecting some PKCs into their venture so they can bootstrap their own legal ecosystem.
I see. So that's exciting that you are trying to foster more and more business via the lab design. If we could talk about now some of the tech aspects, one of the things that I found really exciting in your white paper is that you're arguing that you are incorruptible by nature. That's quite exciting to state that for your distributed database. So how is that possible, given your certified data and your timestamping?
Right, because we don't have anything ourselves, right? So there is no central whatever that at Pikcio that we could either corrupt. Let's put it that way. That we could access. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay.
And corrupt. So, the data are themselves completely remaining in the different devices or database where they come from. Anytime there is anything done to any kind of data, it's immediately written in the ledger, and the ledger itself is distributed. So it's pretty hard to corrupt the whole process.
Right. So
it's pretty feasible if you start.
Sure. So you've made it clear that because of the distribution, it's tamper-proof. But let's talk about that in the context. Say a device crashes. What's the mechanism in place to compensate for that?
Well, you have a network of proxy. So as an individual, the application will look at basically your proxies in the network and hash and distribute your data, encrypted, of course, among the network. So if anything happens, you can rebuild your own server very quickly.
I see. Well, if we could now talk about I guess the challenging topic, and that is your consensus itself. Now, you've done a very interesting, provided a very interesting model, and that is your proof of usage, and you're moving later on, as I understand, to proof of activity later, not yet currently functioning. But let's just talk about that and why you've designed it this way. What is its main function?
Well, as I mentioned very quickly earlier, the existing proof were too time consuming, and if you start to sell to a bank or even to an individual that yes, we do keep just again very simple process like KYC. We're not talking about a big amount of data, and it takes 10-20 minutes. That's not going to fly. The bank will not like it. You're not going to like it, so obviously we couldn't have the existing proof in place. That wouldn't work. So we had to come with something taking advantage of the fact we do it's a permission-based blockchain, so we could work on the consensus, not to eliminate consensus process, of course,
right.
But at least reallocate what they were doing. And that's how we came with the proof of usage.
Excellent. Yeah. So what's exciting is that you also have in your roadmap, you plan to evolve that into proof of activity. And what is further exciting is that there's a sort of a plastic nature in the approach you're taking. You're not concretely focused or finitely focused on one specific design of consensus, but you're open to the idea of change.
Correct. Yes. Okay. The same way we also open to interoperability.
Yeah, tough word. Yes.
In the morning between chains. I think we have definitely the more reason to exist and focus and specifics. But we will, I think, for and especially end users, but also business, they will want to see more operation between different chains. And so we're working on that the same way we're working on being able to use other identity projects into our chain.
Right. And what's interesting too, also, given that you've done that, you've chosen a very interesting blockchain to partner with, and no doubt that is Neo. Can we talk about that perhaps in the context of public blockchains and more to the point of investment?
Right. So the Neo is a contact we start mid last year in the summer because there's not that many chain existing, and we got to know the Neo project closer and really liked their approach, their ambition, and the values of that I was able to discuss with Dongfei at that time. And so we had a lot of similarities. Except they're an open blockchain, although they had with on-chain, they had some experience with forking as a more private blockchain.
That's right.
So they understood the necessity to have both, at least since they have a much bigger ambition about the type of asset they want to see on the chain.
Yes.
So we kept talking and look at how we could partners and foster more close relationship, knowing that for us, China was definitely an ambition, and that's something we put into place now. Mm-hmm. So the and then
on-chain.
I don't remember which one came first. Yeah, no, on-chain, but and then. I think ontology came first on the table, or the investment, but one of these two came in a way that Neo wants to support or token, and so they purchased a large amount of it. I mean, it will amount to almost 5%. Mm-hmm. So that's significant, and it's significant for us as a recognition of the value of our chain in terms of technology, although it's not in on-chain. It's not an on-chain or a neo technology; it's us. Right. But they recognize it was important in our scope, and then then ontology came also, and that's what we're collaborating now since January with ontology to. For us, being probably the first existing application gathering personal data, and especially in the banking industry. Then for us being maybe when we bridge with ontology or use ontology protocol to bridge with others to be the application, the end user application for these type of data. There are many type of data that will circulate on ontology, right? And we at least wants to be the sort of gateway for personal data.
Right.
So that's collaboration.
And no doubt, Didier, it's designed to be mutually beneficial economically and in an enterprise sense. So do you envisage that you will also build out more business in China, for example, or even in other areas of the world, because you have made this big leap in this partnership, and likewise for also Neo and ontology and on-chain? Surely it's beneficial for them.
Exactly, and I think it has to be, like any good deals, has to be a win-win, and the win-win here is, of course, smart people talking to smart people. I'm talking about the technical people here, right? We can exchange concept, and we really share a lot of values there, and on-chain. I mean, try to get into a more distributed. Pattern as well, or architecture as well. So that's one benefit. The second benefit is business. Obviously, we are in Europe and we are a little bit in the US. We start to be in Middle East, and that interests Neo a lot, of course. And for us, want to be in China, and to go in China on your own is tough, kind of an adventure. So there is obviously collaboration, and at the end of the day, I think although we might have some competition area where we're in competition, some others we're not. We are talking about pushing the same overall technology of blockchain into a whole lot of industries, and I always thought that in my career that when you associate yourself, with partner, although you might compete at one point, it's still towards the same goal, and we better be all together than on your own, and I think that's the same spirit with Neo. So we're still a long way to go to transform all the industries based on blockchain. Personal data, the core of many industries. So we have very strong ambition for it, for the PikcioChain, and it's going to be done with the help of Neo and vice versa.
It's very exciting. So obviously you're doing a lot of work collaboratively. You want to become quite global, no doubt, and certainly Neo does. But let's talk about that ambition coupled with the challenges of the SEC had to be brought up. Obviously now, even we broached it before, we have to be careful with terms like ITO rather than the other, and look at utility. So let's talk about that. You're in the US right now in Boston. How serious is this, and what are you doing to ensure that you remain compliant, regulated, and viable for the future? Right.
I had some very interesting conversation the last few days here in Boston. You're right. Fortunately for us, our headquarters is in Switzerland. Our R&D is in France. So we did the ICO based there. So we had other discussion with the Swiss authorities, but not like SEC, where you don't really have a discussion. What folks are worrying about here is how much it will affect the ITO process per se. There's a lot of good initiatives here in the US, but just the fact that now everything will be qualified as a security, meaning having to go to broker, et cetera, et cetera. The process itself to be certified or I don't know the exact legal term by the SEC, means that it's going to take almost a year. So it almost looks like for a year, people here won't be able to basically to do anything.
I see. So how does that affect you, Didier? How does that affect you, given that you are not you're not registered in the US?
Right. We did not accept any investment from U.S. investor, okay, accredited or not accredited. We decide to be pretty tough there, but we didn't want to have any kind of issue. We went to lawyers. We were qualified as utility token, etc. So we did everything right, but we still say, no, thank you. Thank you, but no thanks. And that's sad. I mean, that's really sad because we had a lot of interest here.
Yes. Perhaps that's also stifling the innovation that's happening in the US. Given that their stance is so strong, it's risking stifling the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it could. And I met a lot of folks these last few days that are thinking to position themselves somewhere else in the world.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for clarifying that, because we can be rest assured that you have put in the right measures for PikcioChain, and that's the big point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to have any kind of issue.
Absolutely. You've also mentioned some big partners with Neo, On-Chain, and Ontology, but you also have some very exciting strategic partners in place. How important were the selections you made with EY, PwC, and, my apologies, but
Capgemini.
Yeah, that's the one.
Capgemini.
So, yeah, so how important were they? Obviously, you had a lot of options.
Right. So there are different kinds of partnership. One of them is to partner, and that's not finished. We initiate discussion with all the big 5, 6, 7 what you would call consulting companies in the world and others to basically, it's an accelerating process for us. We acknowledge that we're small, we don't have a big brand, and eventually to not just educate and convince companies like banks that innovation is important and what we provide might be a way to solve some problem, but then implement it, etc., deploy it everywhere. It takes a lot of resource, and we don't want to be hiring a lot of people to just dedicate these resources there. We prefer to focus on what we do best and expand geographically. So we do partnership with these large corporations that do have already a lot of clients in the banking and the healthcare industry, etc.
I see.
So they do the consulting. We provide the technology. They do the implementation. I mean, roughly, it's not exactly like that with everything, but
right.
and then we manage we maintain the chain for the customer.
I see.
So for us, it's a way to accelerate worldwide because these brands have worldwide activities, and so it's a matter to animate that indirect sales network, but that's the reason.
And Didier, you alluded to this actually for 2018. You referenced the comparisons between last year and what you anticipate for this year already. Revenue-wise, no doubt you're expecting a better return. Given that you already have these great partners, you're building out your partnerships. Hopefully you can discuss some of them. But also in terms of your clients, you have really big clients in there as well that are utilizing your service. So let's talk about those two things. Not just so much your clients now, but what you envisage building out in this year for both clients and your partners. Are you really optimistic about this?
Oh yeah, it's. I think it started fantastically, and it's. We're really running. We're not walking. We're running, and we're we're a little bit pushing the envelope too much, but that's a good thing. It's we're recruiting a lot on that front as well to keep up. I think we will have by the end of the year all the major banks in I wouldn't say Europe yet, but we're working on that. Definitely France and probably Benelux. And we expand.
I'm sorry, Didier, I have to stop you there. Let's talk about that. So right. You're quite optimistic. You're going to have a majority of banks from France and potentially other areas of Europe. That's a really big deal, considering that most blockchain projects right now are just in the phase of theoretical.
Yes, but the thing, you're right, and I think that's the benefit of our approach, which eventually was not considered very well initially, but will pay off in a way that we're not focusing too much on technology. We're not there to spend a lot of time trying to, and I'm not criticizing what initiatives, that's different,
Sure.
but our approach was different in a way that we really kind of downsize the impact of the technology, or at least in our sales pitch. It's really, we think we identify one of your problem. Here's what we propose to do. Let's test it. The same way we do the Pikcio Labs. A company can do a Pikcio Labs with us. 2-3 months on a sample with KPIs, very precise KPIs. It works, deploy. It doesn't work.
Right.
That's sorry.
And Didier, in that context, arguably it's working because not only are you making money, but you're making money in an increasing fashion, month on month.
Right.
It's increasing the revenue. So let's go back to those clients. How is this going in terms of numbers? How many clients do you have? Because last we checked, you had 3 big ones with BNP, with Cardiff, and P2Link, but you have more.
Right.
You definitely have more.
I'm leaving for France. Not tonight, tomorrow night.
Right.
So I'll be there for the end of the week. And so we should sign by between now and end of April, I would say 2 major ones. And exciting. Before June, 2 more. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it is. It's
obviously,
going well.
We're not trying to create hype in the market, but it just makes sense given that what you're already doing, you're building it out, the framework's there. And let's talk about now again your partnerships. Are you planning on building out further partnerships as you build out your clients?
Yes, definitely. We'll because that some are more into banking, some are more into the healthcare, some are more in the infrastructure part. So we're talking with, all the major names. It's not going to work with everybody, but I think there is work for everybody. And then we also have, like PwC, we're talking with them for partnership about the token sale wallet, because they're interested into the whole process of ITOs in general as a concept. But also there is extremely big brand that would validate the process itself and the fact that the ITO issuer will be also compliant. So that's a sort of other kind of partnership that we're setting in place.
And what's interesting too is that the ITO industry is already very robust, and you're addressing that. And I understand you're pressed for time, so you have accelerator programs. They are very exciting, and if you'd like to know more about them, you can look into them on the website, and that's certainly exciting. But let's talk about the token itself. It's an important, I suppose, discussion right now, and that is you have a clear function. You've made a point of establishing that this is the Pikcio token is essentially the fuel to monetize the personal data component. You're also going to essentially reach a vast number of sectors, and it has a specific role. Could you tell us a little bit more about the tokenomics, though, with regard to your distribution, cap, date of ICO, the big stuff, the big picture?
All right. Big picture. So the ICO is up and running. It's going to end of this month, 31st of March. We have a hard cap of 30 million. US dollar. Okay. And we are manufacturing, so to speak, issuing 83 million tokens and a few tokens, and out of which 43%, 36 millions are on sale.
Okay, so let's split it up. We've got private sale, we've got crowd sale. How does that work?
We still have, we roughly have a little bit less than half gone for the private sales and private pre-sales. Right. And so we still have almost half of the inventory now for crowd sale.
Okay, so you're making it quite accessible for people, and no doubt it'll be a hot sale. Many people must be interested in your tokens and in your project, but obviously it's focused on the utility. It's not about necessarily investment as we've seen in the past. It's about actually using the blockchain. And actually using and utilizing the products that you offer through your service.
Right. So you'll be able to through the PKC you purchase to use the service, to use the certification services offered by several other companies, and then we'll come up with some other features later on, especially when we have the a little bit more feedback on the exchange place where user will be very pleased with what they can do with their token.
Right, well, let's talk about that as well. Well, you said a key word, which was exchange, also with regard to incentivization. So you have an incentivization program built in place, as I understand, to really incentivize users and consumers. So we can talk about that, but also exchanges. Have you got any idea of what the directions that exchanges are going to go in the future?
Oh, exchanges in general. So I'm not talking here about putting our token on exchange, because that we cannot do. But
right.
It's more us building an exchange. I think the direction will be. That's a very good question. It's obviously in the US. It's very complicated.
Right.
I think all the exchange will have to go to regulation. That we cannot avoid. That it's not a bad thing either. I'm not against regulation one bit.
Not at all.
But what will eventually, or that's our goal, is that I think you will need to have a decentralized exchange. I don't see how we can just repeat the good old things with centralized exchange. I mean,
sure.
That's kind of counterintuitive with what we're trying to achieve.
Right.
So that's the big challenge, but it's complicated. It's
right.
It's not easy.
And what about incentives, Didier? What about for those who want to engage in the token itself and utilize it as use your service? What incentives are you offering for the user?
We had, now we don't anymore, but we had premiums, and it just ended a few days ago.
Okay.
So
they're done. Right, but you had some great ones there. Right, and also I wanted to reference, I understand you're pressed for time, as we've said. The team itself is quite impressive. What I liked about it was you've really thought hard about all the different skill sets, and it's very clear on your website. I can give you some examples of the strengths that you do address. You have research, development, strategy, plan, operations, sales, community, and a more general space for others as well for content creation. You have all those areas and those skill sets covered with the team you've built. So you must be quite proud of your team.
I am, and it's growing. I recruit yesterday 3 people, 3 additional people who are pretty seasoned people in the consumer area and in B2B and also business intelligence. So we are growing pretty well, what's exciting is that now we are a good combination in terms of, first of all, location. We're in I think it's going to be 6 locations pretty soon. So we are a distributor ourselves. That means we're working hard to make it work. Secondly, we have a good combination in terms of age. We have seasoned, we have newcomers in the workplace, and with various talents. That's a little bit of the benefit of having some years of experience, is that your network is normally pretty well populated by talents that you remember and say, one day I'd like to work with that person.
Right. And what is impressive, you also have some strong academic skill sets with some of your team, like Jurek, for example, is just outstanding with his PhD qualifications. And one thing I did want to mention also is that you have a technical team as well, that isn't actually on your website, that's quite robust and building and growing.
Yeah, we have... I think there's 12 now. It's actually it's going to be 14 with 2 recruitment ongoing. So that team is growing. We do not advertise too much on that team for a very practical reason, is that there is a lot of poaching in the area where we are in Montpellier, because there's not that many. We were the only one for a while, then some companies come in the field and they're trying to hire engineers. So
I see.
We're a bit secretive and very protective.
Well, my apologies for mentioning them, but
that's all right.
They do exist and they are very impressive, I can tell you. So just with regard to roadmap, Didier, you have a very exciting few events coming up this year. Obviously, March has been very good to you and very important with your Pikcio Me wallet being released or in the stages of being that happening. But let's talk about Q2.
Yep.
You have the Pikcio labs that we talked about. You've got mining incentive programs coming. What are you most excited about for the future? Q2, Q3.
Oh gosh, we're going to keep settling in different part of the world. So as I mentioned quickly, we will be in China, depending a little bit of bureaucratic process there. It's supposed to be Q2. It might be Q3. But that will allow us to start the pilot regarding smart cars, because that's the reason why we are there. We have a use case of personal data in the smart car area, and that's going to be both between China and Dubai.
Didier, I love how you're so modest. That's a very big thing, given that cars are essentially, they're per capita, there's a lot of them, let's say, and you're wanting to be involved in that process of integrating technology and systems.
Yes.
So you must be excited about that.
It is. It is very exciting. It's complicated, again, but it fits pretty well our strategy of agreeing to move ourselves out of our frontier, so to speak, and go to places where there is a hub of experiments and knowledge, and sometimes a regulation sandbox that allows to pilot with strong partners, because that's most of the time these hubs have a strong industry partners, and so we can have hands-on experiments right there, and that we all learn a lot, and at the end of the day of the experience, 2, 3, 4, 6 months, we end up with something pretty robust that can work and be spread all over. And that's our strategies. That's our strategy why we are in the Middle East. That's why we are in China. We're going to Japan in June. It's the same idea. And then we'll come back. I was in, as you know, in Melbourne, where we saw each other.
Yes, it was great to meet you there.
I remember when. It was like a few,
yes,
few
it was
days,
about a week ago.
And so we look at there as well, and then we'll come back in Latin America. So there is a lot of places in the world that are kind of bubbling. We're trying to find a good place for each of the use case we have, or have not yet experiment. And so the idea is to, by the end of 2018, to have at least 3 very strong use case, and 2019 have 6 or 7 very strong use case, meaning not just a proof of concept, but really something that works in main industries.
So what I'm hearing from you is you're quite confident in the construction and I guess overall growth of your project, your company. You must be very excited in what you've already achieved and very proud of it. But I did want to ask you one final controversial comment, and that is with regard to competitors. Obviously, Civic is a point of discussion worth broaching, because there's different competitors out there that are doing similar things. But what truly sets you apart? Before we conclude, what would you say to those who do make comparisons?
I think it's, again, I'm very I admire a lot entrepreneur who come up with project, and I will never denigrate most of them. Some are scam, but that's different. But definitely not the case of Civics or others. And there is a lot of initiatives around digital identity. It makes total sense because it's very important. There are different approach, and one of the approach is what I would globally call sovereign identity, which is a pure B2C approach, or C2B, so to speak.
Right.
And that approach we test ourselves 3 or 4 years ago, and there was some appetite in terms of the features or the project itself. There was absolutely no way to monetize it. That's what we found. That means there is definitely an appetite, but no way to build a business. So at least that's what we found, and that's why we also found that if you, in that personal data economy, if you just go BC or C2B, you're missing a point, which is the main market itself of the data is B2B.
Right.
You as an individual, you're highly involved because these are your data, but the market is B2B. So you have to provide, that's why eventually became our approach, a B2B to C or B2C to B, it doesn't matter, but it has to be 3 parts in that puzzle in order to make a real balanced exchange platform where everybody's rebuild the trust, but also find itself the service it's looking for or the monetization. And most of the, all of the sovereign identity projects are not taking that road. They're taking another approach, which I respect. But it's not ours. So that's the major difference, I would say.
I see. And now, it's a very diplomatic answer, really, because what essentially you're saying is it's great whatever companies if whatever initiatives and projects they're doing in relation to sovereign identity, but you're solely focused on what you're doing and building that out.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And what we will do, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what we will do is try to, and we start actually, approach some of these initiatives and say, look, we have a chain as well, which is a platform. Why don't we allow these let's call that these identities to be able to work on our chain?
Hence
we'll do that.
Hence the interoperation, hence the cross-chain elements. So you're a proponent of collaboration. You're not averse to it. You encourage it. And arguably it's going to bolster the industry itself as we transition into decentralized business places and platforms and marketplaces.
Exactly.
Well, Didier, it's been an absolute privilege. I've learned so much from you. Before we finish, is there anything you'd like to just finally say to the audience today about the very exciting PikcioChain?
No, I think it's the fact to have an audience is pretty cool. It's pretty. I really like that, and whatever tough the audience can be every now and then, it has to be. That's how we get better. And I'm very, very pleased that since the beginning of this year, we do have an audience. We are not that B2B is not an audience, but it's not the same kind of audience.
Right.
So it's very refreshing. It's very exciting to see that there is traction in the individual as well. So there will be some traction when business deploy that towards their customer. There will be, obviously, we're going to meet some needs. And that's very exciting.
Well, Didier Collin de Casaubon, it's been an absolute honor. I personally have learned a great deal from having this discussion. I do apologize, it's been a bit long. I know you have to go now to a meeting. But again, what is interesting is you are functional, you're existing, you already have a well and truly successful enterprise component built out utilizing blockchain technology. You anticipate much more business in the future. There's certainly strong technology innovations coming this year with your wallet iterations, with many other things. We sincerely look forward to watching you as you evolve, and I'll be watching personally and giving you a call when I hear about new news and saying, let's talk again.
That works. Thank you, Brad.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Didier.
Take care.
For your time.